In an elegant house, a humble nanny organizes a birthday party for the orphaned girl she loves like her own daughter. The father forgets the date, and his jealous girlfriend decides to ruin the nanny with cruel intrigues. False accusations lead to her dismissal, and the child suffers an emotional breakdown. Only truth, together with justice and forgiveness with boundaries, rebuilds the bond that was almost destroyed. The Aspen, Colorado sky dawned cloudy that Saturday, but inside the Montgomery mansion in Aspen Heights, Lucy was preparing to transform that day into a special moment. It had been 2 years since the 27-year-old who came from Boulder, Colorado, worked as a nanny in the luxurious residence. Today was Helen's birthday. She was turning 7. "They're beautiful, Lou," exclaimed little Helen, watching the colorful balloons Lucy was attaching to the living room ceiling. Her brown eyes sparkled with excitement, and her light brown skin showed dimples when she smiled. "You really like them, Princess?" Lucy adjusted the girl's floral dress, smiling at the enthusiasm on her face. "The cake is still missing. It will be chocolate with strawberries, just the way you love it." Lucy was not just an employee in that house. Ever since Eliza, Helen's mother, had passed away after a long battle with a devastating illness, the nanny had become the child's safe harbor. Richard Montgomery, a real estate mogul, had immersed himself in work after losing his wife, leaving an emotional void that Lucy had naturally filled. "Is Mommy watching from heaven, Lou?" Helen asked as she helped place the colorful plates on the table. "Yes, my love, she is. And she must be very proud of the beautiful and clever girl you are becoming." Lucy hugged Helen, feeling the familiar ache in her heart. There was no way to replace the girl's mother, but she did everything in her power to ensure Helen grew up surrounded by love. In the kitchen, Mrs. Connolly, the cook who came 3 times a week, was putting the finishing touches on the homemade cake. "The girl deserves a nice party. Mr. Montgomery didn't even remember, did he?" "Did he call?" the elderly woman asked, with a tone of reproach she didn't try to hide. "Not yet," Lucy replied, looking away. "But he must be busy with the convention in Denver. He'll probably call later." The truth was, Richard had mentioned he would return in time for his daughter's birthday, but Lucy knew from experience that her boss's promises often got lost amidst meetings and business commitments. So she decided to organize a small celebration herself. It wouldn't be anything grand. Her salary wouldn't allow it, but it would be made with love. "Mr. Montgomery needs to wake up to life," Mrs. Connolly murmured, beating the batter harder than necessary. "That woman is no help at all." The woman in question was Patricia Vance, Richard's girlfriend of 8 months. With a degree in business administration and an MBA from abroad, Patricia worked at the same development company as Richard and, since the beginning of their relationship, made a point of maintaining a calculated distance from Helen. "Let's talk about good things today," Lucy cut in, not wanting Helen to overhear. "The present is already wrapped and the cake is almost ready." The present was a doll Helen had admired for weeks in the downtown store window. It cost almost 1/3 of Lucy's salary, but it would be worth every penny to see the joy on the girl's face. By 4 in the afternoon, everything was ready. Lucy had invited Mrs. Nelson, a neighbor who always brought cookies for Helen, and her grandson Peter, the birthday girl's school friend. The decoration was simple: colorful balloons, a handmade happy birthday banner made by Lucy, and the table set with a floral tablecloth and disposable plates. "Lou, can I open my present now?" Helen bounced, anxious. "Of course, my love. It's all yours." Lucy handed her the package wrapped in purple paper, Helen's favorite color. The girl tore open the wrapping with childish enthusiasm, and her eyes widened when she saw the doll of her dreams. "Julia, you bought Julia for me." She hugged the doll and then threw herself into Lucy's arms. Thank you. You're the best heart mother in the world." Lucy felt her eyes well up. Heart mother was what Helen had called her since the day at 5 years old she had asked if she could have 2 mothers, one in heaven and one on earth. The title, granted with the innocence and pure love of a child, was the greatest honor Lucy had ever received. The sound of the electronic gate interrupted the moment. Helen ran to the window. "Daddy's here!" "Daddy's here." The girl dashed to the entrance hall. Lucy took a deep breath. She hadn't told Richard about the small party, hoping to surprise him too. Deep down, she hoped the gesture might bring him closer to his daughter. The door opened. And Richard entered, wearing an impeccable suit, followed by Patricia, elegant in a tight black dress and high heels. His expression of surprise at seeing the decorations was quickly replaced by one of embarrassment. "Daddy!" Helen hugged her father's legs. "Look, we're having my birthday party. Lou made everything and bought Julia for me." Richard knelt to hug his daughter, while exchanging glances with Patricia, whose perfectly sculpted eyebrow arched in disapproval. "Birthday? Of course." He smiled, tense. 7 years old, isn't it, Princess?" "Daddy!" Daddy didn't forget. Lucy immediately realized he had forgotten. The blush on his cheeks and his evasive gaze gave him away. "Mr. Montgomery, we prepared a small party for Helen," Lucy said, approaching. "I hope you don't mind." "Of course not, Lucy. It was very kind of you." Richard stood up, still holding his daughter's hand. "Patricia and I bought a present for you, Helen, but it's in the car. I'll go get it." "Don't worry, darling," Patricia interrupted with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "We can give it to her later. We won't interrupt the party Lucy organized." The condescending tone did not escape Lucy, who maintained her professional demeanor. "I made a small cake, sir, and Mrs. Connolly prepared some snacks. Everything is ready if you'd like to join us." Richard seemed relieved by the escape Lucy offered. "Of course, let's celebrate." "Patricia, do you mind if I get the present from the car?" "I'll go with you," Patricia replied quickly. Before leaving, she shot Lucy a piercing look, a mixture of irritation and calculation that sent a chill down the nanny's spine. When the couple left, Mrs. Nelson approached Lucy. "That woman doesn't like you, dear," she whispered. "Be careful." Lucy smiled, trying to hide her discomfort. "It's just an impression, Mrs. Nelson. Today is Helen's day. Let's make it a happy party for her." Richard and Patricia returned 15 minutes later with a large, flashy box. "Look what Daddy brought, Helen," Richard announced, handing the present to his daughter. Helen opened the package with the same childish excitement and found a brand new tablet with a princess-decorated case. "Wow, a tablet!" She thanked him politely, but her eyes quickly returned to the Julia doll which she held firmly in her other arm. "It's the newest model, honey. It has several educational games," Richard explained, clearly disappointed with the lukewarm reception to the expensive gift. "Thank you, Daddy." "Thank you, Aunt Patricia." Helen smiled politely at her father's girlfriend, who returned it with a distant nod. "How about we sing Happy Birthday?" Lucy suggested, feeling the tension grow in the room. Everyone gathered around the table where the homemade chocolate and strawberry cake awaited, decorated with 7 colorful candles. As they sang, Lucy watched Helen's illuminated face, who didn't let go of the doll for a second. At that moment, under Patricia's calculating gaze, Lucy couldn't imagine how that simple birthday celebration would unleash a series of events that would forever transform the lives of everyone in that house. 3 days after Helen's birthday, the Montgomery mansion seemed to have returned to normal, but Patricia Vance had not forgotten the incident. Sitting on the balcony that offered a spectacular view of the Aspen Mountains, she watched Lucy and Helen playing in the garden, the intimacy between the two fueling a jealousy that grew like a weed. "Did you see how she looks at you?" Patricia commented when Richard joined her, bringing 2 glasses of wine. "As if you were an intruder in your own home." Richard frowned, following his girlfriend's gaze. "Who, Lucy? Who else would it be?" Patricia swirled the wine in her glass, maintaining a casual tone. "She practically took your place as a parent. The party, the presents, the decisions about Helen. Everything goes through her first." Richard watched his daughter running through the garden, chasing soap bubbles Lucy blew. Helen laughed, a sound that had become rarer since Eliza's passing. "She's been good for Helen," he replied defensively. "Since Eliza left us, it's been difficult. Work consumes so much of my time, and you pay Lucy well to take care of your daughter," Patricia completed, placing her hand on his. "But don't you think it's strange that she's overstepping her boundaries? Organizing a party without telling you? That's not normal, Richard." The seed of doubt was planted. In the following days, Patricia nurtured it with seemingly innocent comments, always when they were alone. "Helen barely looks at that expensive tablet, but she won't let go of the cheap doll Lucy gave her. Have you noticed how Lucy always makes decisions about Helen without consulting you? She called you Heart Mother, Richard. Doesn't that bother you? It's like she's replacing Eliza. Richard, initially resistant, began to notice small things he had previously ignored. How Helen ran to Lucy when she got hurt, instead of looking for him. How the nanny knew all his daughter's tastes and preferences, while he often felt like a stranger. On a particularly cold July evening, Patricia arrived at the mansion displaying a delicate gold ring. "My grandmother's gift," she explained, showing the small ruby embedded in the piece. "She wanted me to wear something of hers when I finally met a man worth—" Richard smiled, flattered, and kissed her. Later, as they dined, Patricia asked Helen about her day, an unusual gesture that did not go unnoticed by Lucy, who was serving dessert. "Helen and I did a science project today," Lucy commented. "She's learning about the solar system at school." "How interesting," Patricia replied with a forced smile. "Make sure to use the tablet her father gave her. It has excellent educational apps about astronomy." An uncomfortable silence hung over the table. When they finished, Patricia excused herself to use the bathroom in the master suite, where she remained for a suspiciously long time. The next morning she came down for breakfast agitated. "Richard, I can't find my ring. Have you seen it? Your grandmother's ring? Wasn't it on your finger last night?" Richard asked, concerned. "Yes, but I took it off to shower and left it on the bathroom counter. Now it's not there." Patricia seemed genuinely distressed. "It has a lot of sentimental value to me." A search of the house began. Lucy and Helen also helped, checking under furniture and between cushions. After 2 hours, Patricia suggested, "What if we check the staff's rooms? I know it's embarrassing, but this ring means a lot to me." Richard hesitated, visibly uncomfortable with the suggestion. "Patricia, that would be an invasion of privacy." "I understand, darling," she sighed with a resigned air. "It's just that my grandmother would be devastated if she knew I lost something so special to her." Mrs. Connolly, who was preparing lunch, interrupted. "You can search my room. Mr. Montgomery, I have nothing to hide." "Me too," Lucy added, although her face showed the humiliation she felt. "If it helps find Mrs. Vance's ring." Reluctantly, Richard agreed. He himself checked Mrs. Connolly's room first, a simple and organized space at the back of the house. Nothing was found. When they reached Lucy's room, Patricia insisted on accompanying them. The nanny's room was small but cozy, with a single bed covered by a patchwork quilt, a small bookshelf with books, and a few family photos in simple frames. "You don't need to feel embarrassed." "Lucy," Patricia said with false sweetness, "we all lose things sometimes." The search was methodical. Drawers were opened, the closet inspected until Patricia approached the bed. "Shall we check under the mattress? Sometimes things slip into strange places." Richard seemed increasingly uncomfortable, but did not intervene. Patricia lifted a corner of the mattress and, as if guided by a sixth sense, slipped her hand underneath. Her face transformed into a mask of shock. "Oh my God," she recoiled as if stung. "Richard, look at this." There it was, the delicate gold ring with a ruby exactly where Patricia knew it would be, where she herself had placed it the night before. "Lucy?" Richard's voice was a mixture of disbelief and disappointment. I don't know how that got there," Lucy stammered, her face pale with shock. "Mr. Montgomery, I swear I didn't take that ring." "It was under your mattress, Lucy," Patricia observed, stepping back to stand beside Richard, assuming the role of a betrayed victim. "Why would it be there if you didn't put it there?" Helen, who was watching from the doorway, ran to the nanny. "Lou doesn't steal, Daddy." "She's good." Richard gently moved his daughter away. "Helen, go to your room, please. The adults need to talk to us, but Daddy—" "Now, Helen." The tone brooked no argument. With tears in her eyes, the girl ran off. When they were alone, Richard faced Lucy. The man who had always been fair and reasonable seemed to have disappeared, replaced by someone cold and suspicious. "I trusted you." "Lucy," he said, the disappointment evident in every word. "Why? If you needed money, you just had to ask me." "Mr. Montgomery, I didn't take that ring," Lucy repeated, tears already flowing freely. "I don't know how it got there, but it wasn't me. I would never do that. You've known me for 2 years. I thought I did." He interrupted, his tone icy. "Maybe Patricia is right. Maybe you're overstepping your role in this house." Patricia remained silent, but her eyes gleamed with ill-disguised satisfaction. "I want to believe you, Lucy," Richard continued. "But the ring was in your room. How do you explain that?" "I can't explain it," Lucy replied, wiping away her tears. "I can only say I didn't take it. Maybe someone wants to harm me." "Are you accusing me?" Patricia stepped forward, indignant. "Do you think I would put my own grandmother's ring in your room?" Richard raised his hand, asking for silence. "Enough, Lucy. Consider this a warning. I won't take drastic measures this time, out of consideration for your time with us and Helen's attachment to you. But I am deeply disappointed." Lucy felt as if the world had collapsed on her shoulders. Never in her entire life had she been accused of dishonesty. The injustice of the situation was suffocating. "I understand, Mr. Montgomery," she replied with dignity despite her tears. "I appreciate you not firing me, but I want you to know that I am innocent, and one day you will realize that." In the days that followed, the atmosphere in the mansion became heavy. Richard began to treat Lucy with distant formality, subtly monitoring her interactions with Helen. The girl, sensitive to changes, noticed that something was wrong. "Why is Daddy mad at you, Lou?" she asked one night, as Lucy helped her with her bath. "Your father isn't mad, Princess," Lucy lied, massaging shampoo into the girl's hair. "He's just worried about work." "Is it because of Aunt Patricia's ring? I heard her telling her friend on the phone that you stole it." "But I know you don't steal." Lucy's heart ached. "Sometimes, Helen, people think wrong things about other people. The important thing is that you and I know the truth." What Lucy didn't imagine was that, for Patricia, the ring incident was just the beginning. In her apartment in downtown Aspen, the executive was planning her next move, with a calculated coldness that contrasted with the sophisticated facade she presented to the world. In her purse, a small bottle of anxiety pills, clonazepam, awaited its moment. "You wanted war, Lucy," she murmured to herself, studying the medication's leaflet, "but you have no idea who you're dealing with." Meanwhile, in Helen's room, Lucy held the sleeping girl, looking at the stars through the panoramic window. She felt a storm approaching, but she could never imagine the magnitude of the destruction Patricia was about to cause. Thursday morning dawned particularly cold in Aspen. Patricia had spent the night at the Montgomery mansion and woke up early while Richard was still asleep. In the master bathroom, she opened her toiletry bag and removed the clonazepam bottle she occasionally took to control anxiety. With surgical precision, she separated a pill and broke it in half, putting one half back in the bottle. The remaining half was crushed with the back of a toothbrush until it turned into a fine powder. Patricia stored the powder in a small folded piece of paper and hid it in her purse. Her plan had been meticulously elaborated during the week, after extensive research on dosages and side effects. Downstairs, Lucy was already preparing Helen's breakfast. The morning routine was almost a ritual. Fresh orange juice, whole wheat bread with butter and honey, and chopped fruit. Helen, still in her pajamas, helped set the table. "Good morning." Patricia entered the kitchen with a radiant smile, completely out of sync with the tension that had hung over the house since the ring incident. "What a beautiful day, don't you think?" Lucy responded with a discreet nod, while Helen mumbled an unenthusiastic "good morning." The girl had become even more reserved in the presence of her father's girlfriend. "I thought the three of us could do something special today," Patricia continued, pouring herself coffee. "Maybe a walk through Aspen Mountain Park after school. What do you think, Helen?" The unusual proposal made both Helen and Lucy look at Patricia with surprise. "I don't know. I have homework," Helen replied, looking at Lucy as if asking for approval. "Homework can wait a bit, can't it, Lucy?" Patricia's tone was challenging. "I think it's important for Helen and me to have more time together, since I'm part of her father's life now." Before Lucy could respond, Richard appeared in the kitchen. "Good morning, family," he said, kissing the top of Helen's head and then Patricia's lips. His greeting to Lucy was a simple, distant nod. "What's the plan for today?" "I was just inviting Helen for a walk after school," Patricia explained. "Maybe you can join us later." Richard seemed pleasantly surprised. "I'll try to leave the office early." "It would be great to spend some time together." Lucy remained silent, continuing to prepare Helen's lunchbox for school. Her face betrayed no emotions, but inside she was boiling with worry. In the almost 2 years she had worked for the Montgomerys, Patricia had never shown any genuine interest in Helen. When the school van honked outside, Lucy walked Helen to the gate as she did every morning. Have fun on your outing with your father and Patricia, she said, adjusting the girl's scarf. I'll be waiting for you with a delicious hot chocolate when you get back. Helen hugged the nanny tightly. I wish you were coming too, Lou. I know, Princess, but it will be nice to get to know Patricia better. Your father really likes her. The morning passed normally. Richard left for work, and Patricia announced she was going to the mall to buy Helen a present. Lucy took the opportunity to do some household chores, including washing and ironing the girls' school uniform. In the afternoon, as usual, the school van dropped Helen off at the gate at 3:30 p.m. Lucy greeted her with a hug, and together they entered the house. In the kitchen, Patricia had already returned and surprisingly was preparing the afternoon snack. Hello, Helen. How was school today? She asked with an enthusiasm that sounded almost forced. Normal, the girl replied, placing her backpack on a chair. Her eyes lit up when she saw the orange juice already served in her favorite glass. Juice! I made it especially for you, Patricia said, exchanging a quick glance with Lucy. I know you love orange juice when you get home from school. Lucy felt a chill down her spine. There was something in Patricia's excessively solicitous tone that put her on alert. You didn't need to worry, Patricia. Preparing Helen's snack is part of my job. It's no work at all. After all, we're practically family, aren't we? Patricia's smile didn't reach her eyes. Helen, oblivious to the tension between the two women, picked up the glass and drank half the juice in eager gulps. It tastes different, sweeter. I added a little honey, Patricia explained quickly. Try the rest, it's even tastier at the bottom. The girl shrugged and finished the juice. Lucy began preparing a sandwich to complement the snack, while Patricia watched Helen with an unsettling intensity. 20 minutes later, while Lucy was helping Helen with her homework in the living room, the girl began to show signs of drowsiness. Her eyes blinked more frequently and she seemed to have difficulty concentrating. Lou, I'm sleepy, she murmured, rubbing her eyes, and my head is spinning. Lucy placed her hand on Helen's forehead. There was no fever, but the girl definitely didn't seem well. Did you sleep well last night, Princess? Helen shook her head negatively, then stopped abruptly as if the movement bothered her. Everything's spinning, Lou. Her voice was slurred and her movements became uncoordinated. Alarmed, Lucy stood up. Helen, can you hear me clearly? The girl tried to stand up but staggered. Her eyes were unfocused and she seemed to struggle to stay conscious. Lou, I'm strange. At that moment, Patricia entered the room. What's going on here? I don't know, Lucy replied, holding Helen, who practically collapsed in her arms. She was fine until now, and suddenly she started to get drowsy and disoriented. Patricia rushed to them, performing concern. My God, Helen! Helen, dear, what are you feeling? Dream, the girl murmured, almost unintelligible. I want to sleep. This isn't normal, Lucy stated, panic growing in her voice. We need to take her to the hospital. Patricia already had her cell phone in hand. I'm calling Richard, and I'll call an ambulance. While Patricia was on the phone, Lucy tried to keep Helen awake, gently patting her face and calling her name. The girl responded less and less, as if she were being pulled into sleep against her will. The ambulance arrived in 15 minutes, which felt like an eternity. The paramedics quickly examined Helen, checking her vital signs and asking questions about what she had eaten or drunk. Did she take any medication? One of the paramedics asked. No, Lucy replied emphatically. Helen doesn't take any regular medication. She had lunch at school and then drank orange juice here at home, Patricia added. That's all, isn't it, Lucy? The way Patricia emphasized the nanny's name did not escape Lucy's notice, but her concern for Helen was greater than anything else at that moment. Helen was placed on a stretcher and taken to the ambulance. Lucy went with her, holding the girl's hand, while Patricia followed in her own car, claiming she would need to pick Richard up from the office on the way to the hospital. In the emergency room of St. Catherine's Hospital, the best equipped in Aspen, Helen was immediately attended to. Blood tests were taken, and the on-call doctor, Dr. Marcia Taylor, performed a full physical examination. Her vital signs are stable, but she shows symptoms of intoxication, the doctor explained. We'll do a toxicology screen to identify the substance. Intoxication? Lucy repeated, incredulous. What do you mean? She didn't have access to any medication or toxic products. Sometimes children find pills or products that adults leave within reach, the doctor replied, without directly accusing anyone. The important thing now is to identify the substance for proper treatment. Lucy sat beside Helen's bed, holding her small hand and watching her chest rise and fall with regular breaths. The girl seemed to be just in a deep sleep now, which brought some relief. Half an hour later, Richard arrived accompanied by Patricia, both visibly disturbed. "How is she?" Richard rushed to his daughter's bedside, caressing her hair. "Stable. The doctor said it looks like intoxication. They're waiting for the toxicology results," Lucy explained. "Intoxication?" Richard's face paled. "How did this happen?" "She was under your care, Lucy." Before the nanny could reply, Dr. Taylor returned with a clipboard in her hands. Her expression was grave. "Mr. Montgomery, we have the preliminary results of the toxicology screen. We found traces of benzodiazepines in Helen's blood, specifically clonazepam." The shock on Richard's face was genuine. "Clonazepam, but that's a controlled medication. We don't have that at home." "Actually, Richard," Patricia intervened, her voice trembling in a convincing performance, "I take clonazepam occasionally for anxiety. But I keep the bottle in my purse out of reach." All eyes turned to Lucy, who seemed as shocked as the others. I don't understand. Helen didn't have access to any medication. She only drank the juice that—" Her voice trailed off as she realized the implication. "The juice you prepared before we picked her up from school," Patricia completed, the lie flowing easily. "Richard, I didn't want to say this, but I've noticed strange behaviors in Lucy lately. First the ring, now this. What are you talking about?" Lucy stood up, indignant. "I didn't prepare any juice today. It was you who gave Helen the juice when we got home from school." Richard looked from one to the other, confused and distressed. Dr. Taylor cleared her throat, clearly uncomfortable with the situation. "Perhaps it's best we discuss this in private. The important thing is that Helen is out of danger. The dose was not enough to cause permanent damage, but we'll need to keep her under observation tonight." "I'll stay with her," Richard declared, determined. "I can stay too," Lucy offered. Richard turned to her, his gaze hardened by fear and doubt. "No, Lucy, I think it's better you go home. In fact, I think it's better you don't come back." "What?" Lucy's voice was just a whisper. "You're fired," Richard continued, his tone icy. "I can no longer entrust my daughter's safety to someone who could do something like this. Richard, I would never harm Helen. I love her as if she were my own daughter." Tears streamed freely down Lucy's face. "That's exactly the problem," Patricia intervened. "You started acting as if Helen was yours. First the birthday party, then the ring, now this. It's a pattern, don't you see, Richard? She wants to take your place in Helen's life." Lucy looked at both of them, incredulous. "How can you believe this? Patricia is manipulating you. It was she who gave Helen the juice today." "Enough, Lucy." Richard's voice was sharp. "Don't worsen your situation with unfounded accusations. I want you to leave the hospital now, and tomorrow I will send your things to the address you indicate. Your labor rights will be respected, but I don't want you to approach my daughter again." "Richard, please," Lucy begged, but the businessman had already turned his back, focused only on Helen. Patricia approached Lucy, speaking softly so only she could hear. "Don't worry about your things. I'll pack everything myself." Very carefully, her cold smile froze Lucy's blood. Destroyed, Lucy left the hospital. The aspen sky, once so comforting with its shining stars, now seemed a dark and oppressive vault. The life she had built over the past 2 years, her love for Helen, her trusting relationship with Richard, everything had been shattered by a cruel and calculated trap. In the hospital room, as Richard held his sleeping daughter's hand, Patricia smiled discreetly at her reflection in the window glass. The main piece had been removed from the board. Now the Montgomery family would be shaped exactly as she planned. The boarding house room in the Willow Creek neighborhood was small but clean. With only a single bed, an old wardrobe, and a dresser, it represented all that remained of the life Lucy had built over the past 2 years. Sitting on the edge of the bed, she watched the fine rain falling over Aspen through the room's single window. 2 weeks had passed since her dismissal. 2 weeks of tears held back during the day and shed at night, when loneliness embraced her like a cold blanket. She looked at her cell phone once more. No messages. No calls from Richard or, more painfully, from Helen. The day after her dismissal, A Montgomery Mansion employee had appeared with her bags and a formal letter of termination, along with an envelope containing her severance pay. No goodbyes, no chance for defense, no opportunity to see Helen one last time. "Mrs. Lucy, are you coming down for coffee?" Mrs. Edith's voice sounded from the other side of the door. "I'll be right there, thank you," she replied, trying to hide the crying in her voice. She got up with effort and went to the small shared bathroom in the hallway. The face in the mirror was haggard, with deep dark circles that betrayed sleepless nights. She splashed cold water on her face, trying to bring some life back to that defeated expression. In the boarding house's simple dining room, Mrs. Edith served her a hearty breakfast with a ihai look of maternal concern. "You need to eat properly, dear. You're wasting away." "Thank you, Mrs. Edith, I'm trying." The truth was, every bite was a monumental effort. Worry for Helen consumed her thoughts. How was the girl? Did she understand why Lucy disappeared from her life? Was she suffering? The unanswered questions formed a knot in her throat that made it almost impossible to swallow any food. "Did you find anything?" the landlady asked, sitting at the table with a cup of coffee. Lucy nodded unenthusiastically. "I'm starting at the St. Mark's building cleaning on Monday. It's not what I was used to, but it's honest work." After a week of sending resumes and knocking on doors, she had finally found a job as a cleaner in a commercial building. The salary was less than half of what she received as a nanny, but at least it would cover the boarding house rent and basic meals. "It's temporary, my dear. I'm sure something better will come along soon." Lucy forced a grateful smile, but deep down she knew her options were limited. In a small town like Aspen, news traveled fast. Although Richard had not disclosed the reasons for her dismissal, rumors circulated. The Montgomery family's nanny, suddenly fired after the girl was rushed to the hospital. Speculation was inevitable. After coffee, Lucy decided to walk through town. The cold mountain air usually brought her comfort, but that day, not even the natural beauty of the pine trees and the European charm of the buildings could lift her spirits. Unbeknownst to her, her steps led her to Aspen Mountain Park, where she used to take Helen to play on weekends. The image of the girl running and laughing remained vivid in her memory. She sat on a bench, letting the tears flow freely now. "Lucy, is that really you?" The voice startled her. It was Mrs. Nelson, the Montgomery Mansion's neighbor, walking her dog. "Mrs. Nelson, what a surprise to find you here." The elderly woman approached, her face a mixture of relief and concern. "Thank goodness I found you. I've been passing by that boarding house every day, but I never saw you. You were looking for me?" "Why?" Mrs. Nelson looked around as if fearing to be overheard and lowered her voice. "It's Helen, my dear. She's not well." Lucy's heart raced. "What happened? Is she still sick?" "It's not a physical illness, Lucy. The girl is wasting away with sadness. She barely eats, hardly leaves her room, doesn't want to go to school. Richard is desperate." Lucy closed her eyes, feeling a physical pain in her chest. "And he still thinks that I would have hurt Helen." The neighbor shook her head. "I don't know what he thinks, but I know that Patricia is increasingly entrenched in the house. It was she who spread to everyone that you were fired for negligence." "What?" Lucy felt her blood boil. "She had no right. I would never harm Helen." "I know, my dear. I never believed that story. There's something wrong with that woman. I always knew it." The two talked for a few more minutes. Mrs. Nelson promised to bring news of Helen whenever possible and left, leaving Lucy with an even heavier heart. Meanwhile, at the Montgomery Mansion, the situation was as bleak as the cloudy sky covering the town. Helen was sitting on her bed hugging the Julia doll, Lucy's last gift. Her eyes, once vibrant, now seemed dull. Her cheeks, once rosy, had lost their color, and her bone structure was beginning to become more prominent due to her persistent refusal to eat properly. "Helen, Princess, you need to eat," Richard pleaded, sitting on the edge of the bed with a tray of food. "Look, I made a heart-shaped sandwich just the way you like it." The girl looked at her father without showing any reaction. "It's not the same. Only Lou made it right." Richard sighed deeply, placing the tray on the nightstand. In the past 2 weeks he had tried everything. New toys, outings, even a puppy that Helen had barely looked at. Nothing seemed to reach the girl, who was sinking deeper into a worrying silence. "Helen," he tried again, choosing his words carefully. "I know you miss Lucy, but why did you send her away?" The girl's voice came out harsh, accusatory. She didn't do anything wrong. I know you don't understand now, honey, but it was for your own good. Lucy, she wasn't who we thought. Lie! Helen shouted, hugging the doll tighter. Lou would never hurt me. Aunt Patricia lied to you. She doesn't like me or Lou. Richard recoiled, surprised by the outburst. It was the first time in days he had seen any emotion in his daughter other than apathy. Helen, don't talk about Patricia like that. She's trying to help. I don't want her here. I want Lou back. The girl began to sob, an uncontrollable cry that shook Richard to his core. You promised you'd never leave me alone after Mommy left, but now you took Lou away from me too. The businessman tried to hug his daughter, but she pushed him away, turning to the wall. Powerless, Richard left the room, finding Patricia in the hallway. I heard the screaming, she commented, her tone falsely concerned. Is she still difficult? Patricia, I'm really worried. She's not eating properly, she has nightmares, she refuses to go to school. Richard ran a hand through his hair, a gesture of pure despair. Maybe we should take Helen to a psychologist. A psychologist? Patricia frowned. Don't you think that's an exaggeration? It's just a childish tantrum, Richard. She's testing your limits, wanting attention. It's not a tantrum. She's wasting away in front of me. She's lost almost 6 pounds in 2 weeks. The pediatrician said if this continues, they'll need to hospitalize her for intravenous hydration. Patricia placed her hand on his shoulder in a calculated gesture of support. Calm down, darling. Helen is strong. She'll get through this. Children are resilient. She just needs to understand that you did what was necessary to protect her. Richard subtly moved away from her touch. Something about Patricia's reaction, the ease with which she dismissed Helen's evident suffering, bothered him more and more. I'm going to make an appointment with Dr. Beatrice Sampson anyway. She specializes in child psychology. As you wish, Patricia replied, displeasure evident in her tone. I just think we're giving too much attention to this behavior. Didn't you yourself say that Helen was always a bit dramatic? Richard stared at her, surprised. I never said that. Helen has always been a balanced and happy child, at least until... He didn't finish the sentence, but the thought hung between them, until Lucy was fired. The following week, Dr. Beatrice Sampson visited the mansion for a first assessment of Helen. After almost 2 hours with the girl, the psychologist requested a private conversation with Richard. Mr. Montgomery, I am quite concerned about Helen's emotional state, the doctor declared without mincing words. She shows clear signs of childhood depression, likely triggered by an abrupt rupture of an emotional bond. Richard felt his stomach sink. Depression? But she's only 7. Unfortunately, children can also develop depressive disorders, especially after significant losses. Helen has already lost her mother, and from what I understand, she had a very strong bond with the nanny, who was recently removed. It was a complicated situation, Doctor. We had reasons to believe Lucy could pose a danger to Helen. The psychologist maintained a neutral, professional expression. Mr. Montgomery, I am not here to judge your decisions as a father. I am merely pointing out that, whatever the reason, the sudden removal of a substitute maternal figure is having a devastating impact on your daughter's mental health. And what can we do? I will prescribe intensive therapeutic treatment, sessions twice a week to start, and I strongly suggest that all adults in Helen's life maintain a stable and affectionate routine. At this moment, she needs to feel security and constancy. When the doctor left, Richard remained seated in his office, work reports forgotten on the desk. The words childhood depression and abrupt rupture of emotional bond echoed in his mind. For the first time in weeks, he allowed himself to seriously question the decision to fire Lucy. What if he was wrong? What if he had made a terrible mistake, not only against Lucy but primarily against his own daughter? The sound of his cell phone interrupted his thoughts. It was Henry, his longtime friend and family lawyer. Richard, we need to talk about that incident at the hospital, Henry said, without preamble. I've been reviewing some points, and there are things that don't make sense. What are you talking about? About Helen's toxicology report. I requested a copy as your lawyer, and there are inconsistencies in the time the substance could have been administered. Richard felt a shiver run down his spine. Come here now. As he hung up the phone, his gaze caught a photo on the wall. Helen smiling radiantly, in Lucy's arms during a trip to Santa Monica. The genuine happiness on his daughter's face was a painful contrast to the apathetic child who now inhabited the mansion. The doubt, small but persistent, began to germinate in his heart. And along with it, something more dangerous to Patricia's plans grew. The determination to discover the truth, no matter the cost. Richard's office was shrouded in gloom, lit only by the desk lamp on the mahogany desk. Outside, the Aspen night brought that characteristic mist that enveloped the mansions of Aspen Heights. Henry Almeida, childhood friend and trusted lawyer of the Montgomerys, spread documents across the table while Richard poured 2 whiskeys. Helen's toxicology report shows clonazepam concentration consistent with ingestion between 1 and 2 hours before collection, Henry explained, pointing to underlined numbers in the document. Considering the exam was done at 5:40 p.m., the drug was administered between approximately 3:40 p.m. and 4:40 p.m. Richard frowned, trying to reconstruct the timeline of that fateful day. Helen arrived from school around 3:30 p.m. Exactly. And who was with her at that time? Lucy greeted her at the gate, as always. And Patricia. Patricia was already in the kitchen. The realization hit Richard like a lightning bolt. She said she had prepared juice for Helen. Henry nodded gravely. There's more. I spoke with the pharmacist at St. Catherine's Hospital. The dose found in Helen's blood was relatively low, enough to cause drowsiness and disorientation, but not to put her at real risk. Almost as if someone knew exactly how much to administer to cause alarming symptoms without causing permanent damage. Richard swallowed the whiskey in one gulp, feeling the liquid burn his throat. I'm starting to wonder if I made a terrible mistake, Henry. Don't jump to conclusions. We need more information. Henry opened another document. Do you remember Patricia's claim about the neighbor calling to comment on Lucy's strange behavior on the day of the ring incident? Mrs. Nelson, yes. Patricia said she saw Lucy acting suspiciously, rummaging through things in our suite while we were out. Well, I called Mrs. Nelson today, pretending to do a neighborhood security survey. She categorically states that she never made such a call. Furthermore, she said she was at the hair salon that day on the other side of town. Richard's hands began to tremble slightly. What else have you found? We don't have concrete evidence yet, but there are pieces that don't fit. Henry hesitated. Richard, how long had you known Lucy? 2 years? Did she ever give you reason to doubt her honesty or her affection for Helen? Richard closed his eyes, remembering the care with which Lucy braided Helen's hair each morning, her infinite patience in helping her with homework, the invented stories she told to make the girl smile on days when her mother's absence weighed heavily. Never, he admitted, his voice hoarse with emotion. Until Patricia started pointing out supposed problems, I completely trusted Lucy. And when was the last time you saw Helen truly happy? The question hit Richard like a punch to the gut. In the almost 30 days since Lucy's dismissal, his daughter had transformed into a shadow of the vibrant child she used to be. The consultation with the psychologist only confirmed what he already feared. Helen was sinking into depression. I need to investigate further, he decided, standing up abruptly. If I made an injustice, take it easy, Henry advised. If your suspicions are correct, we are dealing with someone manipulative and potentially dangerous. We cannot act rashly. In the following days, Richard initiated a meticulous and discreet investigation. Taking advantage of Patricia's trip to Denver for a supposed refresher course, he began to search the house for evidence. In his office, he called the pharmacy where Patricia claimed to have bought the clonazepam. He confirmed that she was indeed a registered customer with a valid prescription for the anxiolytic. Then he checked the medication bottle in her toiletry bag. Pills were missing, consistent with her report of occasional use. The investigation seemed to stagnate until, checking the trash can in the master bathroom, Richard found a small crumpled receipt. As he opened it, his heart raced. It was from Diamond Jewelers, dated 3 days before the ring incident. The amount, $280. Picking up his cell phone, he photographed the receipt and sent it to Henry before calling his friend. I need you to check something for me. Is it possible to find out what item was bought with this receipt? 3 hours later, Henry called back. 18-carat gold ring with a small ruby, exactly like the one Patricia claimed to have inherited from her grandmother. The final piece of the puzzle appeared, when Richard decided to check the clonazepam pill box. Placing them on the table, he counted meticulously. There were 14 pills in the blister pack that should have contained 15 if Patricia had been taking them regularly as prescribed. However, the bottle had been refilled only a week earlier. Where was the missing pill? That night, Richard awaited Patricia's return with a knot in his stomach. When she arrived around 9 o'clock, he maintained his composure, acting normally during dinner, chatting about pleasantries. Patricia seemed carefree, commenting on the traffic on the way back from Denver and asking about Helen. "Did she eat better today?" she asked, pouring herself wine. "A little," Richard replied, watching her carefully. "The psychologist thinks it might be childhood depression." Patricia discreetly rolled her eyes. "Frankly, I think we're giving too much attention to this behavior. She's just manipulating you to get what she wants. And what do you think Helen wants? Obvious, isn't it? She wants that nanny back." Patricia took a sip of wine. "But that would be crazy after what happened. She drugged your daughter, Richard. It could have been much worse." Richard took a deep breath, controlling the anger that began to bubble. "It's curious you mention that. I've been reviewing the facts of that day." Something in his tone made Patricia place her glass on the table with excessive care. "Why?" "Helen arrived from school at 3:30 p.m. The toxicology report shows that she ingested the clonazepam between approximately 3:40 p.m. and 4:40 p.m. During that period, only 2 people were with her, Lucy and you." Patricia maintained a neutral expression, but Richard noticed the slight tremor in her fingers. "So what?" "We already know it was Lucy. She had access to my medicine, probably took it when I wasn't looking." "Curious you mention your medicine." Richard stood up, going to the china cabinet drawer. From there he retrieved the clonazepam bottle. "I counted the pills, Patricia. Exactly half a pill is missing from this new blister pack." Her face paled slightly. I took it last night. I was anxious about the trip." "Lie." Richard's voice was icy now. "Last night you took a pill from another blister pack, which is in your purse." "I checked." Patricia stood up abruptly, knocking over her glass. The red wine spread across the white tablecloth like blood. "You've been rummaging through my things?" "How dare you!" "I also found this." Richard threw the jewelry receipt onto the table. "Curious that your grandmother's ring was bought 3 days before it disappeared, don't you think?" The shock on Patricia's face quickly gave way to a calculating expression. Realizing that the charade had been discovered, she abandoned the act. "So what?" Her tone was challenging now. "What are you going to do? Report me? Based on what? A receipt?" "That proves nothing, Richard. Your word against mine." "Why, Patricia? Why do all this?" She let out a bitter laugh. "You really didn't notice? That little nanny was taking over everything. Your house, your daughter, you." The way she looked at you, as if she had rights. "And you didn't notice a thing. So it was jealousy?" "You did all this out of jealousy?" Richard couldn't believe the coldness of the woman in front of him. "Call it what you want. I was protecting our future." "That woman was nobody, Richard. A maid, a glorified cleaning lady who forgot her place." The cruelty in Patricia's words made Richard recoil. How could he have been so blind? How had he not noticed the malice hidden behind that sophisticated exterior? "You planted the ring in Lucy's room," he stated, the pieces falling into place. "And then you drugged my daughter to frame an innocent woman, all to eliminate her from our path." Patricia crossed her arms, the mask of sophistication completely abandoned. "Technically, I didn't hurt anyone. It was just half a pill, perfectly safe. Helen just got a little drowsy, nothing serious. You put my daughter at risk." Richard's voice exploded through the room. "And you destroyed an innocent person's life. Please, she'll find another job. Maybe not as comfortable as practically being the lady of the house here, but she'll survive." Patricia shrugged, composed. "As for us, we can get through this. It was a lapse in judgment on my part, I admit. But I did it thinking of our future." Richard stared at her, finally seeing the real Patricia behind the facade. "There is no us, Patricia. Not after this." "Don't be dramatic," she tried to approach, but Richard recoiled. "Look at what we've built together. Are you going to throw it all away because of a nanny?" "No, I'm going to throw it all away because you are a terrible person who jeopardized my daughter's physical and mental health." His voice was firm now. "I want you to pack your things and leave my house, now." Patricia narrowed her eyes. "You can't be serious." I've never been more serious in my life." For a moment, Patricia seemed about to argue. Then her face hardened into a mask of calculated coldness. "You'll regret this. Do you think you'll fix everything by chasing after that little woman?" "Too late, Richard. The damage is already done." Richard stood firm, though inside he was devastated. "Get out of my house, Patricia, or I'll call the police and tell them everything I've discovered." With a final look of contempt, she went upstairs to pack her things. An hour later, the taxi that would take her away pulled out through the mansion gates. Richard watched the taillights disappear into the mist, feeling a mix of relief and horror at what had happened. That night, he barely slept. Guilt gnawed at him. He had unjustly fired Lucy, a woman who had only done good for his family. Worse, he had believed Patricia's lies without question, driven by prejudice. It was easier to believe the nanny, a simple woman of humble origins, was guilty than to question the word of his sophisticated executive girlfriend. And Helen, his dear daughter, was paying the highest price for his error in judgment. At dawn, Richard had already made his decision. It was time to correct the terrible mistake he had made. He needed to find Lucy and beg for her forgiveness, however impossible it seemed. But first, there was a crucial stop to make. The sun was still rising when he parked in front of the Central Police Station in Aspen. With determined steps, he entered the building and asked to speak with the chief of police. It was time for Patricia to face the consequences of her actions. As he filled out the police report, detailing every aspect of the cruel setup, Richard felt a weight being lifted from his shoulders. He didn't know if Lucy would forgive him. Perhaps the damage was irreparable, but at least he was doing the right thing. Leaving the police station 2 hours later, he took a deep breath of the crisp mountain air. The mist had dissipated, and the sun shone with a rare intensity for that time of year. It seemed like an omen, a promise of clarity after weeks of obscurity. Now came the hardest part, finding Lucy and facing the devastation he had caused in her life. The first light of morning already illuminated the streets of Aspen when Richard parked his car in front of the imposing St. Mark's building in the city's commercial center. After almost a week of searching, he had finally discovered where Lucy worked, thanks to a tip from Mrs. Nelson. He waited in the car, observing the service entrance. His heart pounded, his hands sweaty despite the mountain cold. What would he say? How could he even begin to apologize for what he had done? At 6:30 a.m. he spotted her. Lucy arrived walking, dressed in a simple cleaner's uniform, her hair tied in an unpretentious bun. Even from a distance, Richard could see how much thinner she was, her face marked by tiredness and sadness. He got out of the car and walked towards her. When Lucy saw him, she froze in place, the blood draining from her face. "Lucy," he called, stopping a few steps away, respecting her obvious discomfort. "What do you want?" Lucy's voice was cold, distant, so different from the warm Nanny he had known. The formal use of you was a clear barrier, reminding both of the unequal relationship that had always existed between them. "We need to talk." "Please," Richard pleaded. "I have nothing to talk to you about. I'm late for work." She made to move on, but Richard gently blocked her path. 5 minutes. That's all I ask. After that, if you want me never to approach you again, I will respect your decision." Something in his desperate tone made Lucy hesitate. After a moment of tension, she nodded stiffly. 5 minutes. Richard led her to a small nearby park where they could talk undisturbed. They sat on a bench, keeping their distance from each other. "I found out the truth, Lucy," he began, looking directly into her eyes. "Patricia confessed everything. She planted the ring in your room and drugged Helen to frame you." Lucy absorbed the information without showing surprise. "I knew. From the beginning, I knew it was her. I went to the police. I filed a complaint against Patricia for all the crimes she committed. She will answer for everything she did." A heavy silence settled between them. Words seemed inadequate in the face of the magnitude of the injustice committed. "How is Helen?" Lucy finally asked, her expression softening for the first time. The question, the fact that her first concern was the girl, after all she had suffered, made Richard feel the weight of his guilt even more. "She's not well," he admitted, his voice choked. She doesn't eat properly, doesn't sleep, has nightmares, doesn't want to go to school. The psychologist diagnosed childhood depression due to an abrupt rupture of an emotional bond." Silent tears began to stream down Lucy's face. "My little one." She misses you, Lucy. Calls for you in her dreams. Richard was also crying now, making no effort to hide his emotions. I made a terrible mistake. Not just with you, but especially with Helen. I let myself be blinded by prejudice and manipulation. It was easier to believe my sophisticated girlfriend's lies than a maid, Lucy completed bitterly. Richard nodded, shame evident on his face. Yes, and I hate myself for it every day. I came here to ask for your forgiveness, Lucy, but I know that might be impossible. The damage I caused, it's not just about me, Richard, she interrupted, abandoning formality. It's about Helen. That child already lost her mother. And then, from one day to the next, she lost the person she trusted who made her feel safe. Do you have any idea of the trauma that causes? I do. I'm seeing the effects every day. He took a deep breath. That's why I'm here. To beg you to come back. Not for me, but for Helen. Lucy stood up abruptly. You think it's that simple? That you can fire me, accuse me of something terrible, destroy my reputation and my life, and then show up with a, "Sorry, it was a mistake"? Richard remained seated, accepting every word as a deserved lash. No, I don't think it's simple. And I will completely understand if you refuse. What happened to me after I left that house, do you know? Lucy pointed to her cleaner's uniform. No one wanted to hire me as a nanny. The rumors spread. The Montgomery family's nanny fired for drugging a child. I had to take cleaning jobs to survive. I live in a small boarding house room. I lost almost 20 pounds from pure suffering. Not for the job, but for missing Helen. I'm prepared to do everything necessary to repair the damage, Richard replied, standing up as well. Public retraction, financial compensation, whatever you ask. Lucy studied him for a long moment. I want you to publicly admit your mistake. To admit that you acted with class prejudice. I want you to prosecute Patricia to the fullest extent of the law. I want fair compensation for the damage to my reputation and for the suffering I endured. And above all, I want respect. I am not an object that can be discarded when convenient. All of that is more than fair, Richard agreed. I will do each of those things, regardless of your decision to return or not. Lucy crossed her arms, thoughtful. And what about Helen? What will you tell her about all this? The truth. That I made a terrible mistake. That I was unfair, that I misjudged the person who loved her most besides me, that I learned a painful lesson about trusting the right people. The promised 5 minutes had already stretched to almost half an hour. The sun climbed in the sky, warming the cold mountain morning air. In the distance, the main church bell chimed, marking 7 o'clock. I'm late for work, Lucy said. Finally, I can speak to your supervisor. Explain? No. She raised her hand, interrupting him. I'll handle this myself. I've always handled my own things, Richard. He nodded, respecting her independence. Can I at least give you my number? So we can talk more when you're ready. Lucy hesitated, but eventually took the card he offered. I'll think about everything you told me. I promise nothing. It's more than I deserve, Richard admitted. Thank you for listening to me, Lucy. She turned to leave, but stopped after a few steps. How is Patricia? After you found out everything. She left the house that same night. The police have already notified her about the complaint. My lawyer is handling the legal proceedings. Lucy nodded with no further comment and continued on her way. Richard watched her until she disappeared around the corner, feeling a mixture of despair and a faint hope. 3 days passed without news from Lucy. Richard had kept his word, initiating each of the promised actions. He contacted the local newspaper, giving an interview where he publicly admitted his error and retracted the damage caused to Lucy's reputation. He instructed Henry to prepare a substantial compensation proposal. The criminal case against Patricia was progressing, with evidence being collected and testimonies taken. At home, Helen's situation remained critical. The girl had lost so much weight that the pediatrician was seriously considering the need for hospitalization for intravenous feeding. Therapy sessions helped, but progress was slow. Richard had explained to his daughter that he had made a terrible mistake with Lucy, that the nanny was innocent, and that he was trying to bring her back. The news brought a small flicker of life to Helen's dull eyes, but the uncertainty of her return kept the girl in a state of emotional fragility. On Thursday afternoon, as Richard worked in his home office, the doorbell rang. Opening the door, his heart almost stopped. Lucy was standing on the porch, dressed in simple but elegant clothes, no longer the cleaner's uniform. "May I come in?" she asked, her tone formal but not hostile. "Of course. Please." Richard stepped aside, trying to contain the emotion that threatened to overflow. Lucy entered, looking around the house she knew so well. Her eyes lingered on the photos of Helen scattered on the walls, and she couldn't help but smile sadly. "I saw your interview in the newspaper," she commented, sitting down when Richard offered the sofa. "It was courageous of you to admit your mistake publicly. It was the least I could do, though no retraction will ever be enough for what you went through." Lucy nodded, accepting the cup of tea the temporary housekeeper brought. When they were alone again, she was direct. "I've thought a lot in the past few days, about what happened, about Helen, about my future." She paused, taking a small sip of tea. "I've decided I'll come back, Richard. Not for you, but for Helen." The relief on his face was palpable. "Thank you, Lucy. You don't know what this means. But I have conditions," she continued, firm. "First, I want a formal contract, with all labor guarantees and a fair salary for what I do, which goes far beyond just being a nanny. Of course, absolutely fair. Second, I want autonomy in decisions related to Helen. Trust me to do what's best for her." "As I always have," Richard nodded. "You always knew what was best for her, much more than I did. Third," Lucy took a deep breath, "I want you to understand that the trust that existed between us was broken. Rebuilding it will take time if it's ever possible. I'm coming back as an employee who loves your daughter, not as your friend." The words hurt, but Richard accepted them. "I completely understand. You set the pace, Lucy. I just appreciate the chance to show with time and actions that I've learned from my mistakes." They discussed practical details for a few more minutes. Lucy could start the following Monday, giving her time to properly close out her current job and move back. Richard insisted on paying a month's salary in advance to help her with the transition, which she accepted after some hesitation. As she was leaving, Lucy asked almost shyly, "Can I see Helen before I go?" "Just for a moment. She's in her room. She's spent most of her time there." Richard hesitated. "Should I tell her you're here?" Lucy shook her head negatively. "I prefer to surprise her. If she's sleeping, I won't wake her." She climbed the stairs she knew so well, her heart beating faster with each step. In the second-floor hallway, she stopped in front of the door decorated with colorful stars, Helen's bedroom door. She knocked gently, and receiving no answer, opened it carefully. The room was in semi-darkness, the curtains closed despite the sunny afternoon outside. On the bed, a small lump under the covers, Helen hugging the Julia doll in restless sleep. Lucy approached silently, feeling tears burn her eyes at the sight of the girl's condition. Helen was pale, visibly thinner, with deep dark circles that shouldn't be on a 7-year-old's face. "My princess," she whispered, sitting on the edge of the bed and gently caressing the girl's hair. Helen stirred, slowly opening her eyes. For a moment she seemed confused, as if she couldn't believe what she saw. Then understanding illuminated her face. "Lou?" Her voice was just a breath, as if she feared speaking louder might make the vision disappear. "Is it really you?" "Yes, my love." "It's me." Lucy could no longer hold back her tears. Helen sat up abruptly in bed, rubbing her eyes hard. "You came back? You really came back? Am I not dreaming?" "You're not dreaming. I came back for you, princess." With a cry of joy that seemed to contain all the suffering of the previous weeks, Helen threw herself into Lucy's arms. She clung to her as if her life depended on that embrace, sobbing uncontrollably. "You left. I thought I'd never see you again. I was so scared." "I know, my love, I know." Lucy rocked her, her own tears wetting the girl's hair. "But now I'm here, and I'll never leave you alone again, I promise." "Promise? Promise on your heart?" Helen pulled back just enough to look into Lucy's eyes, her small face marked by the anxiety of someone who had experienced too many abandonments. "I promise on my heart." Lucy made an X over her chest, a gesture they always used for their most solemn promises. "I'll be here whenever you need me." Helen hugged her again, calmer now. "Food didn't taste good without you, Lou. Nothing was good." From the bedroom doorway, Richard watched the scene, tears streaming freely down his face. The transformation in Helen was instant and miraculous. There was color in her cheeks again, life in her eyes. It was as if a light had been rekindled after weeks of darkness. At that moment, he knew he had done the right thing, however painful it was to admit his mistakes. The road to redemption would be long, but the first step, the most important one, had been taken. And as he watched Lucy and Helen together again, he understood something he had been ignoring for too long. What he felt for Lucy went far beyond gratitude or professional admiration. He had fallen in love with the woman who had brought love and joy back into his daughter's life, and by extension, into his own life. But that was a secret he would keep for now. Trust needed to be rebuilt, respect re-established, and he was willing to wait as long as necessary to prove his worth, not as a boss, but as a man who had learned in the hardest way possible to value true love. The months that followed Lucy's return to the Montgomery mansion were a period of gradual reconstruction. Like the delicate work of restoring a broken stained glass window, it required patience, care, and the acceptance that the scars, though invisible from a distance, would always be part of the final design. Helen was the first to recover completely. In the initial weeks, she clung to Lucy like a small limpet, fearful that the nanny might disappear again. She slept in her bed, insisted that Lucy accompany her even to the bathroom, and anxiously observed any conversation between her and Richard, as if expecting bad news. Gradually, with the consistency of Lucy's presence and the sessions with the psychologist, security returned. Helen began to eat normally, regained the lost weight, and her interest in school resurfaced. Her drawings, once dominated by solitary figures and dark colors, now displayed a family of 3 under a radiant sun: her father, and her heart-mother. For Richard, the journey of redemption was more complex. In addition to the guilt for the injustice committed against Lucy, he carried the weight of having failed as a father by not protecting Helen from Patricia's manipulation. Every small gesture to rebuild trust was executed with genuine humility. He came home earlier from work, actively participated in his daughter's routine, and consulted Lucy on all decisions related to Helen. The case against Patricia advanced through the judicial system. Richard had hired the best lawyers to ensure she was held accountable for her actions. The evidence was compelling: the jewelry receipt, the pharmacist's testimony about the amount of clonazepam in Helen's blood, Patricia's partial confession during the confrontation. Lucy, for her part, maintained a cautious emotional distance. Her relationship with Helen had immediately re-established, but with Richard, the interaction remained formal. The wounds of injustice did not heal so easily. On a sunny September afternoon, 3 months after her return, Lucy was in the mansion garden, watching Helen run across the lawn chasing soap bubbles, when Richard approached with 2 cups of hot chocolate. "I thought you might like a break," he offered, extending one of the cups. "Thank you," Lucy replied, accepting the drink. Her tone was polite but still reserved. They sat side by side on the wooden bench, watching Helen in her solitary game. The silence between them, once uncomfortable, began to acquire a calmer quality. "We received news from the court today," Richard commented, breaking the silence. "Patricia agreed to a plea bargain." Lucy turned to him, interested. "What kind of agreement?" "She will plead guilty to falsifying evidence and negligence, resulting in child endangerment. In return, her sentence will be reduced." Richard took a sip of chocolate before continuing. "Even so, she will have to perform community service for at least a year, pay you $70,000 in compensation, and is prohibited from approaching any member of this family." Lucy absorbed the information in silence. The money meant nothing compared to the suffering she had endured, but there was a certain poetic justice in Patricia having to pay, literally, for what she had done. "She sent a letter," Richard added hesitantly. "To you, of remorse, according to her." Lucy shook her head negatively. "I don't want to read it. I won't give her any more power over my life." Richard nodded, respecting her decision. They returned to watching Helen, who was now building something elaborate with twigs and fallen leaves. "I was falling in love with you," Richard said suddenly, the words escaping before he could contain them. "Before all this happened, I think that was one of the reasons I let myself be manipulated so easily. It was easier to believe Patricia's lies than to face what I was feeling for you." The confession took Lucy by surprise. She stared at the chocolate in her cup, as if she could find the appropriate answer there. "I don't expect anything in return," Richard continued hastily. "I just wanted you to know. Part of my journey of reparation is to be completely honest with myself and with you. You were my boss, Richard," Lucy finally replied. "And you still are. There's an inherent power imbalance in that relationship that can't simply be ignored." "I know," he nodded seriously, "and I promise to respect any boundary you set. I can change the nature of your job if you prefer. Hire someone else to take care of Helen, give you a completely different position in the company, or simply maintain the current arrangement with total professionalism on my part." Lucy allowed herself a small smile, the first directed at him in months. "Let me think about it. Right now, my priority is Helen." "Of course," Richard agreed, relieved that she hadn't completely rejected the idea. "Always Helen first." The following month brought Helen's 8th birthday. Unlike the previous year, this time the party was planned by Richard and Lucy together. A modest event in the mansion garden, with a few selected guests, including Mrs. Nelson, who had been a crucial ally in difficult times. During the preparations, the relationship between Richard and Lucy began to soften. The joint work for Helen's happiness created moments of complicity that gradually dissolved the barriers Lucy had erected. A week after the birthday party, Richard came home with a proposal that surprised Lucy. "I received an invitation to a conference in Denver," he explained, as the three of them dined together, a new habit they had established. "It's about early childhood education and emotional development. I thought you might like to go with me." "Professionally, of course. It would be good for Helen to have more informed adults in her life." Lucy considered the invitation. It was the first time Richard had included her in something outside the domestic environment, publicly recognizing her important role in Helen's life. "I would like that, yes," she replied after reflecting. "Thank you for the invitation." Helen, who observed the interaction with the typical attention of children who have experienced ruptures, secretly smiled at her plate. The seeds of a new family arrangement were being planted, and her childish intuition picked up every small sign. The conference in Denver proved to be a turning point. Away from the memory-laden environment of the mansion, Richard and Lucy were able to interact in a different context, as equals, colleagues interested in Helen's well-being. They discussed the lectures, shared reflections, and for the first time laughed together. On the way back to Aspen, something had subtly changed. The invisible barrier between them began to dissipate, allowing glimpses of what they could be, not as boss and employee, but as two people who shared a love for a child and, perhaps, something more. In the following weeks, Richard continued his transformation process. It wasn't just words of regret, but concrete actions. He actively participated in the domestic routine, learned to cook simple dishes that Helen loved, and included Lucy in all important household decisions. "I realized something important," he commented one evening, as they organized Helen's school supplies for the next day. "All this time, you were never just the one who serves. You were always an essential part of this family. It was I who couldn't see beyond my own prejudice." The sincerity in Richard's words touched Lucy deeply. She had observed his transformation, noticing how he strove not only to compensate for the past, but to genuinely be a better person, as a father, as a man, as a human being. 6 months after her return, Lucy finally felt she could completely lower her guard. The moment happened almost by chance on an ordinary evening. Helen was already asleep, and they were sharing tea on the veranda, discussing plans for the approaching school holidays. "What do you think about going to Santa Monica for a few days?" Richard suggested. "Helen loves the sea, and it's been a while since we've had a real vacation." "It would be great for her," Lucy agreed. "The last time we went to the beach, she had just turned 6. The silence that followed was comfortable, each lost in their own reflections. Then, without planning or expectation, Richard reached across the table and lightly touched Lucy's hand. It was a simple gesture, almost insignificant, but loaded with meaning. Lucy did not withdraw her hand. For the first time, she allowed the touch to linger, recognizing what was growing between them, something new, fragile, but undeniably real. "I know we're still rebuilding trust," Richard said, his voice little more than a whisper, "and I respect the time you need. But I want you to know that my feelings for you have only grown in these months." Lucy looked at their joined hands. "I'm scared, Richard. Scared that if I let this happen, The power dynamics will return. That one day in an argument, you'll remind me where I came from. Never, he promised with intensity. I learned in the hardest way possible that value has nothing to do with origin, diplomas, or bank accounts. It has to do with character, with love, with integrity. Everything you have in abundance, and that I lacked when I most needed to show it. Their eyes met in the soft light of dusk. There was genuine vulnerability in Richard's gaze, and Lucy realized that he, too, was scared, not just of the possibility of rejection, but of the responsibility to honor this new chance. One step at a time, she replied, lightly squeezing his hand. It wasn't a declaration of love, but a door being unlocked, the possibility of a future together. The following weeks brought a gentle transition. Small gestures of affection began to be part of the routine, a touch of hands here, a prolonged glance there. Helen observed everything with ill-disguised satisfaction, often creating situations to leave them alone. One Sunday afternoon, as Richard helped Helen with a science project, the girl looked seriously at her father. "When are you going to ask Lou to marry you?" The question caught Richard completely off guard. He almost dropped the solar system model they were building. "Helen, what kind of question is that?" "Well, you love each other, don't you? And we're almost a family already." At that very moment, Lucy entered the room with a tray of snacks, having overheard the question. Her cheeks flushed intensely. Richard looked at her, equally embarrassed. "Helen has a very vivid imagination." "It's not imagination," the girl insisted. "I see how you look at each other. It's like in Disney movies." Lucy placed the tray on the table, trying to hide her embarrassment. "Helen, these things are more complicated in real life than in movies." "Why?" "You like each other. The three of us get along, and I want Lou to be my mother forever." The childish sincerity created a moment of truth impossible to ignore. Richard and Lucy exchanged glances, their defenses finally crumbling completely. "Maybe one day, Princess," Richard finally replied, without taking his eyes off Lucy, "when the trust is completely whole." "When will it be completely whole?" Helen persisted. Lucy approached, sitting beside them. "Trust is like a plant, Helen. It needs to be watered every day with care and attention. It cannot be rushed." The girl seemed to accept the explanation, returning to her project. But the moment had created a new intimacy between Richard and Lucy, an unspoken promise of future possibilities. 3 months later, during their vacation in Santa Monica, Richard finally found the courage for a first kiss. It was on the beach at sunset, while Helen built sandcastles a few yards away. A gentle, hesitant kiss full of questions and promises. To their surprise, Helen, upon catching them, showed no shock or confusion, only satisfaction, as if watching the unfolding of a plan she herself had orchestrated. "Can we get married now?" she asked with the direct practicality of children. Richard and Lucy laughed, the initial embarrassment dissolving into mutual acceptance of what they were building. A family, united not by blood or social conventions, but by the love they had chosen to cultivate, despite the wounds of the past. The ceremony happened 8 months later, in a small church in downtown Aspen. It was a simple event, with few guests, some of Richard's friends, Lucy's colleagues, Mrs. Nelson, who had always known that truth would prevail, and Helen as the flower girl, so focused on her mission of scattering petals down the aisle that her expression made the guests smile. In their wedding vows, Richard and Lucy openly acknowledged the journey that had brought them there, traversing lies, jealousy, social differences, and injustice, to consciously choose a path of care, reparation, and commitment. "I promise never again to allow prejudices or external expectations to determine how I see you," Richard declared, emotional. "I promise to be the man you deserve, not perfect, but always willing to grow and learn from my mistakes. I promise to always remember that true relationships are built on equality and mutual respect," Lucy responded, tears of joy shining in her eyes. "I promise not to let the past define our future, but also not to forget it, so we can learn from it." At the small reception held at the Montgomery mansion, now officially home to the three, Helen surprised everyone with a brief speech she had secretly prepared. "My dad learned to see true love," the little one declared, with the wisdom that sometimes emerges so clearly in children. "And my heart mother never gave up on us. Thank you for giving me the happiest family in the world. Later, when the guests had already left, the three sealed their family pact at the kitchen table, eating slices of wedding cake at midnight, like a happy conspiracy. "We will always be honest with each other," Richard declared. "We will always protect what we have built. And we will never forget that true love requires work," Lucy added. "It's not magic, it's a daily choice." "And I'll always be able to eat cake at midnight," Helen added, her mouth smeared with chocolate, making the adults laugh. Patricia remained distant by court order and by the trio's choice. The compensation money had been invested in a fund for Helen's education and for social projects that Lucy now coordinated, helping vulnerable families. The mansion that once witnessed so much manipulation and suffering now housed a family rebuilt on more solid foundations: truth, mutual respect, and the understanding that true love is not about power or possession, but about growing together through the challenges that life inevitably presents. In the double bed they now shared, Richard caressed Lucy's face, watching how the moonlight drew soft shadows on her skin. "If I could go back," he murmured, "and change everything that happened." "No," Lucy interrupted, placing her fingers over his lips. "I wouldn't change anything. Everything we've lived brought us here. It made us who we are today. It taught us the value of truth, justice, and forgiveness." Richard kissed the palm of her hand, recognizing the wisdom in her words. It had not been a fairy tale, nor a conventional love story. It had been a journey through darkness to light, with all the scars and lessons that such a crossing imposes. "I will always have to prove that I deserve you," he said, "and I am willing to do that every day." "It's not about deserving," she corrected gently. "It's about choosing every day to be the best version of ourselves. For Helen, for each other, for the world." At the half-open bedroom door, Helen watched silently, the Julia doll, that first gift that symbolized so much, firm in her arms. Her childish face showed a serenity that only children who feel truly secure can manifest. The family they had built was not perfect nor conventional. It was real, forged through mistakes, regret, forgiveness, and the unwavering determination of three hearts that, once united, refused to be separated again. And so, in the peace of the mountain night, the Montgomery mansion embraced not only three sleeping bodies, but the promise renewed with each dawn, that true love is not a fixed destination, but a constant journey of growth, care, and courage to start over, even when the path seems impossible. End of story. Dear listeners, we hope this story of overcoming, forgiveness, and rebuilding has deeply touched your hearts. To continue on this journey of emotions and reflections, we have prepared a special playlist with equally engaging stories about redemption and second chances. Find it by clicking the icon to the left of your player. If this narrative about Lucy, Richard, and Helen awakened something in you, be sure to subscribe to our channel and leave your like on this video. Every day we bring unique stories that explore the complexity of human relationships and the lessons we learn through adversity. What did you think of this unlikely family? Could you forgive like Lucy? Share your impressions in the comments. We look forward to reading your reflections and being moved together again tomorrow with a new story that will surely touch your heart.